Right. Right, I seem to be live. Good morning, everybody. Computer's doing a few strange things. So I'm hoping we got a connection. I can see myself. I can see the comments. So I think all is well. It's a lovely morning here in New South Wales, southern New South Wales. Wherever it is in your part of the world, evening, afternoon, morning, middle of the night. Welcome to another session wherever you are. And a couple of little announcements before we start the meditation session, also to give people a chance to join. You may have all seen that the Wisdom of the Masters YouTube channel has reached 100,000 subscribers about a week ago, I think. So that's all pretty amazing. And if any of you know the background story to how it came to be, there was absolutely no planning around it and no expectation that it would be more than a little, what would you call it, unknown channel with a few hardcore spiritual practitioners who wish to listen to me reading slowly and methodically some amazing spiritual texts. So it was all kind of uploaded to YouTube on a whim, and then as things would have it, it kind of gained momentum, and feedback was always, mostly positive and encouraging to share more if I would. So I did. And but really to say, when we reflect on this, and certainly when I reflect on it with wisdom and insight, that there's the realization that it's got nothing to do with me as a personality, as a construct. It's something that's just happening as a way of sharing the Dharma in these dark ages, particularly when there's so much on social media that's destructive and negative and harmful, and going in the opposite direction to liberation. It's an opportunity to use these technologies in a way that's helpful. So, it's not something that I would ever have consciously really wanted or wished to do, because I don't really like being in a public face, although mostly reading is behind the scenes, but there's still you're still drawn in, if you like, to that world. So I had to really surrender to it in a way that I recognized that it was helpful, and that it wasn't happening because of me. It was just happening through me as a vehicle, as a channel. So anyway, that's just a little bit of reflection on it. And I guess the main thing that came up for me, having reached that kind of landmark, if you like, although it's just a number, but I suppose it's a significant number, that mostly what came up for me was a deep gratitude that there's just an enormous, probably an endless well of teachings out there that have been gifted to us, left to us by these ancient masters from all traditions, from all countries, from all genders, all sexes. And, they're still available for us if we're open to it. So it's a great gift and happy to share. And just on that note of, I suppose having reached 100,000 and reflected on the formation of the channel, there's going to be a few minor changes to ahead in terms of these live streams. They're only small changes, but I'll mention them in detail at the end of the session rather than fill your mind with all the details now. So if you're someone who doesn't go to the end or just does the meditation, when this is recorded, you can find all those details. But it's only minor changes to the setup with the meditation live streams and introducing a new 6-part series that I've asked Aya Jatindriya to run. So that's exciting. It should be really helpful for people who are interested in early Buddhism, because that's her speciality. All right? Okay. Enough from me. And hope you're all here and well. And I thought today we might just start off, before we do offer a guided meditation, with just a short reading from Ajahn Chah from the publication A Taste of Freedom, just as a way of leading us into this meditation and as something to reflect on for the meditation. Okay? So this is just a very short Dharma reflection called About This Mind. About this mind. In truth, actually I should just say, how about you all just get yourself ready for meditation so that you're listening to this in a very relaxed, still and centered way. So it really is the beginning of the meditation. About this mind. In truth, there is nothing really wrong with it. It is intrinsically pure. Within itself, it's already peaceful. That the mind is not peaceful these days is because it follows moods. The real mind doesn't have anything to it. It is simply an aspect of nature. It becomes peaceful or agitated because moods deceive it. The untrained mind is stupid. Sense impressions come and trick it into happiness, suffering, gladness, and sorrow. But the mind's true nature is none of those things. That gladness or sadness is not the mind, but only a mood coming to deceive us. The untrained mind gets lost and follows these things. It forgets itself. Then we think that it is we who are upset or at ease or whatever. But really, this mind of ours is already unmoving and peaceful, really peaceful. Just like a leaf, which is still as long as no wind blows. If a wind comes up, the leaf flutters. The fluttering is due to the wind. The fluttering is due to those sense impressions. The mind follows them. But if it doesn't follow them, it doesn't flutter. If we know fully the true nature of sense impressions, we are unconcerned. Our practice is simply to see the original mind. So we must train the mind to know these sense impressions and not get lost in them, to make it peaceful. Just this is the aim of all this difficult practice we put ourselves through. So just continuing and going into the meditation with this reflection, just adopt a posture that's suitable for you, comfortable for you, whether it's cross-legged or sitting in a chair. And make sure your spine is straight, upright, and relaxed. And if you feel comfortable closing your eyes, please do. If you prefer an open gaze, then just maintain that without distraction. Tuning into your natural breath. If it's helpful to take a few deep conscious breaths to begin with, then please do that. As you tune into the natural breathing process now, sensitive to the whole body, sitting upright, just notice what sort of mood you might be in. If there's some sort of conscious or even subconscious mood that's impacting you or surrounding you, hanging on to you. If you've come from a busy day, you might feel a bit frazzled, a bit fragmented. If something's intense has been happening in your life, or you've had an argument with someone, or an altercation, just notice if that mood of anger or sadness, frustration, or whatever it might be is hanging around. Or you might have just had a peaceful, uneventful day. And as you sit to meditate, you can notice a sense of peace and contentment. So whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Nothing is really better than anything else. Because we recognize that just like all conditions, the sounds, the sights, the smells, the bodily sensations, that these moods also are of the nature to come and go. We might think of ourselves as a depressed person or a happy person, or whatever definition we apply to ourselves in terms of these emotions. But really, when you look closely, they all just come and go. But if we have a tendency to really think of ourselves as that type of personality, say a depressed person, then we can feed these moods. They become habitual, habituated. And so they hang around a lot longer and more consistently. But ultimately, they are not who and what we are. They're simply passing moods, passing mind states. And we need to recognize them firstly, to be conscious of the way some of these moods attach to us, and then we attach to them. When we're not conscious of them, then they just become habitual and somewhat unconscious or semi-conscious. So firstly, it's about opening up with full awareness to the moods that come into the mindscape. Being willing to feel them, be with them, but not analyzing them, not even evaluating them. Just a bare knowing. Grumpiness is like this. Sadness is like this. Excitement is like this. Where do we feel it in the body? How does it impact the overall state of the physical experience. Noting the heaviness in sadness, the fragmentation in excitement or desire. The tension in anger, and so on. These moods bring a certain flavor. They have what you could call a felt sense. And when we're not aware of them, that's when we can be ruled by them. And they take over and dictate our lives, affect our relationships, and our way of being in the world. So first we've got to wake up to them. But with compassion and gentleness. It's not about berating ourselves or catching ourselves out. Simply notice all the different shades, all the different clouds of moods that come and go. And so how do we part these clouds? How do we allow the bright sun of awareness to come through? And to recognize that within us that remains unmoved untouched by all these passing moods. Have you discovered that yet? Or even just glimpsed it? Firstly, the simple way is to start recognizing the fact that something within you knows these moods. There is the inherent knowing nature. So what's that? It's not the mood. It's not the depression, the heaviness, the thought that says, I'm this, I'm that. The reactivity. Something within you has the capacity to know all this. Ajahn Chah referred to it as the original mind. And you can call it what you like. Because whatever you call it is not it. What's more important is simply to recognize it. And when you recognize it, get to know it. Come back to it. Abide in it. Rest in it. Is often known as the Buddha mind. And the word Buddha simply means one who is awake. Or the one who knows. But this knowing nature, and you should see this for yourself, it's not a person or a personality or a thing. So really saying one who is awake, it's more accurate just to say wakefulness, knowingness, or beingness. And in this world, this tumultuous world, where we might have our own internal moods, we're also dealing with the moods that present themselves to our consciousness in the so-called external world. The confusion, the anger, the hatred, the desire, the environmental upheavals and changes. So much to contend with in the conditioned realm. What can we do? Where can we go to escape this? Nowhere. So therefore we have to find, rediscover this refuge within. When you get to know this knowing nature, this Buddha mind, you can become more sensitive to its quite subtle qualities. And these aren't qualities that you can demonstrate to others or show to others. And they're certainly not qualities that you can boast about. But they do have the scent, as it said, the scent of compassion. The scent of wisdom. The scent of a fierce strength and gentleness at the same time. Because it cuts through, uproots delusion. And delusion doesn't have a chance of sticking around when this bright light of awareness is shining. So get to know it. Really, it's just a matter of coming home, if you like, coming back. To your own heritage, your own inherent nature. And this is all meditation is about. Genuine meditation. We're not tripping out. We're not blissing out. We're just noticing that even those things come and go. And we're finding liberation, freedom. In the face of all these reactions within us, these likes and dislikes. So one of the deepest qualities, if you like, of this true nature is a deep, 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 unshakable peace. So it's a peace that's not dependent on conditions. Whether they be in the external world or within meditation itself. The peace is always there, regardless of what presents itself. So I encourage you all to rediscover it, uncover it, because it's not out there with a great guru or teacher. It's not out there in some mystical text. It's just right here, right now. And for want of a better word, it's right here within your own heart. So just coming to end this meditation. Again, you can simply notice the state of your mind, any presenting moods that may have shifted, floated through the sky. recognizing your own knowingness, you can bring that into all your daily interactions, because nothing changes. So if you need to just finish with a few deep conscious breaths or stretching the body, please do so, and we have an opportunity for Q&A. Okay, seems there was an interesting discussion about something funny. Yogurt and blueberry. Probably just some funny trolls. Okay, so if there's any questions, there is one from Mitchell. How do the negative emotions or states of mind transmute through compassionate awareness? Is there an intention to change them, or does it simply occur through practice? Yeah, good question, Mitchell. You know, I can't really answer how these things happen. All I can say is I know these things can happen because I've experienced directly through my own experience. And I think a lot of people who have meditated for a time will have seen these changes happen. So I can tell you sort of how, but until you really see it for yourself, it's just going to be an explanation. But it's simply through the power of wisdom itself. And I talked about the qualities of this knowingness, this awareness. It's said to have the scent of compassion. So, you know, but as I said, I can't prove that. I can't show you that. You have to experience that for yourself. But when you say, you know, just take a simple example, you might be in a very painful mood, a lot of painful mind states. And you've heard that the best way, and you're trying to practice it, the best way to deal with it is just to shine the light of awareness on it, to just hold it in consciousness. We're not doing psychoanalysis on it. There's a place for that, but we're not doing it in this context. We're not evaluating it. We're not trying to push it away even though when it's painful, we want to get away from it. We just notice that, okay, this is really painful. And I also see, there's a really strong desire to get away from it. So we're not suppressing it, but neither are we going to the other extreme of indulging it. And so when you do that, when you, I guess, have enough ballast, enough inner mindfulness and strength just to bring the awareness to it, it transforms naturally. Right? And the wisdom itself starts to see the nature of these mind states, these moods. And as you look closely, and this isn't looking in a way that's thinking and analyzing, it's a non-conceptual awareness and understanding. You see the nature of these moods to be empty, such that when you at one level, they seem to be so intense and so real and so overpowering. But when you can just stay in this knowing nature and look without an agenda, just looking, just holding, the wisdom that arises sees their empty nature, their non-self nature, their changing nature. And even going deeper into it, when we go that deep, we see that they actually don't truly exist as a phenomena. All right, there's simply just appearances, but there's nothing. There's absolutely nothing that you can hold on to within them. They're substanceless, put it that way. So when you really see that with the eye of wisdom, then what happens? Everything just dissolves, right? And we also see that they're not who and what we are. They've got nothing about the self in them unless we feed them the discursive thinking of this is who I am, this is what happened, this is the type of person I am, this is the type of person they are. That keeps the cycle of delusion going, or what you'd call the cycle of samsara going. So we have to just start, I guess, with baby steps of, firstly, in the midst of all this kind of craziness, recognizing that even for a nanosecond, there's something within us that just knows it, right? And then the more we practice, the stronger the recognition of that knowingness, awareness, whatever you want to call it, becomes. And we learn, and we teach ourselves this, really. No one else can teach you this aspect. But we learn how to rest into it. And to some extent to identify with it more as an authentic, our inherent nature, without making it a new self. Because as soon as we claim something as me and mine, or even my true nature, we can just pick up another identity. So we shy away from concretizing it as a thing, but it's just recognizing. So we've got to hold all this wisdom with a very light touch and with a lot of wisdom, right? Even though inherently it's wise, the ego can get very fooled, right? Or the ego fools itself and starts to claim it as some achievement. So anyway, I hope some of that helped, because it's really just trying to say that you have to, I'll just go back to your question. Yeah, so you're saying, is there an intention to change them, or does it simply occur through practice? Yeah. The intention, I guess you'd say, in that is the right intention to just know it. But it's not will. It's not a will that wants to change it, turn it into something better, repress it, or anything like that. So the will, we recognize the will is just the ego. And the thing that within it, which just knows these states of mind as transient, as not self, is the wisdom mind. And when we know the wisdom mind, that brings the change in and of itself. We don't have to do anything, because as soon as we think we've got to do something, it's just the same old, same old. It's the ego wanting to do stuff. It's the mind, that aspect of the mind that wants to change the mind. But wisdom is not will. Okay, so that's probably enough on that, because it's, really this has to be experienced. This is where meditation has to be experienced for oneself. So to see those changes, and then you don't have any doubts about it anymore. You know it works this way. Okay. So some other questions. I'm glad the meditation was helpful. And thanks for your messages. So John says, something like birdsong can easily seem to be appearing in empty space, appearing to no one. But for me, the experience of the sensation of anxiety, always seems so attached to me who suffers. Why? It's habit, John. It's conditioning. It's layers and layers of conditioning because, from since we were young, if you think about, I'll tell you a little story. It's interesting, isn't it, that the way the bird is objectified as other, but this body and these sensations have become subjectified as me, identified as me. But I remember when I was a baby, believe it or not, this is a story I've told to a couple before, I think, but I can't remember. I must have been about 3 to 6 months because I was in what's called a Moses basket. They're those little portable baskets that parents put you in. And I must have been that young because I was in my mother's room. And I'm knowing this in retrospect, right? In a Moses basket as a young baby. As a young baby, you may or may not remember, but you can just understand this intellectually. Most young babies don't really have a sense of themselves as a separate body, especially really young babies. We learn it. We learn to say that these boundaries, we're going to call it me, this is Jayasara's body, and this feeling, which when you're a baby is just a feeling, and you might scream about it because that's a way that the body protects itself, survives. But the baby's not going, this is my feeling. So anyway, I remember being a baby that didn't know it was a baby and hearing a sound. And that at that moment, that sound brought me into an awareness of being a separate form, being a body. And in that knowing that I perceived myself for that moment as a separate being with me in here and a sound out there. That's how the perceptual intelligence, if you like, started to develop. There was also a feeling of fear because for the first moment, what Nisargadatta calls, there was the understanding of I am a separate entity, being. And so obviously we need that to start to operate and function in the world. But it's only a way of functioning. And what happens is that we get fooled by it and we think that that is the ultimate reality of me as a separate person. So if you come back to this question you're asking of the sensations, it's really because the identification with me as starting here in the body, as these sensations of belonging to me, and I like and I don't like, become so entrenched, so habituated, that it's very hard to, objectify it like just as a passing cloud, as you're saying. And that's why one of the Buddha's most powerful and, well-known teachings to Bahia of the bark cloth, he said to him, and he was ripe, so he could really see this directly. He said, in the seeing, let there be just the seeing. In the sound or in the hearing, let there just be the hearing. In the sensate or the tactile sensations, let there just be the feeling or the sensation, and so on throughout all the sense doors. Now, if you take that into a meditation, it can be really powerful and transformative because you know, when you hear a bird, yeah, it's easy to just drop the label of the bird and just hear sound as sound. But when you bring that to the body, sensations, and it's just sensations without the me in it, let there just be the feeling, that can really start to uproot these delusions of me and mine, as me starting and finishing here within this bodily form. And so the reactions to unpleasant feelings like anxiety and so on can really start to dissolve. But you simply have to practice that in the feeling, in the sensation. Let there just be the feeling. Let there just be the mood, rather than, like I said in that meditation, I am a moody person, I am a depressed person. Just know depression as depression. Okay. So I hope that's helpful. And if you want to read that sutta, actually it's on my channel in the Theravadan playlist. It's called, I think it's called Teaching to Bahia. But anyway, it's a short discourse that he gave to this renunciate, and he woke up from that very teaching and was liberated. So Christine's asking, am I right that the term mind is used differently in Buddhism as in Advaita Vedanta? It's a problematic term, mind, consciousness. People, different teachers use it differently. And without knowing the context within the Advaita system, I think like Ramana Maharshi often refers to the mind as equates it to the ego. So you're thinking about the aspect of mind that is discursive, conceptual, tied up with identifications. So we call that the ego mind. But within Buddhism, I guess you could put a capital big mind. It's a bit like in Advaita, you have the small self and the big self. So you could say in a general sense, the little mind with the small m is often how it's referred to as the ego mind. The big mind, the overarching mind, which is not a thing, okay? Neither of them things. That mind, I mean, Ajahn Chah referred to it as original mind. He often didn't refer to it as original mind, because then people pick it up again as a thing, as an identity, as a permanent substance, and it's not that. But anyway, he did in that talk. And so it's the aspect of the mind that isn't full, that isn't caught up with ego identification. So sometimes I think, particularly within Tibetan Buddhism, they'll talk about equating mind with awareness itself, with Rigpa. Okay, and then, which I think is helpful, because then they just talk about the obscurations. And it's a bit like what Ajahn Chah was saying. The mind itself is originally pure and, free in and of itself. It's empty, it's free, it's open and transparent. And what happens is these obscurations come in, moods, emotions, thoughts, deluded thoughts, and they obscure the brightness of the clear mind. Okay. And I think that's a good way of doing it, because it's otherwise, if we're going, there's mind, or even the small mind, the ego mind, or the small self and the big self, it creates another duality. They're not separate. These things arise and cease within the mind of awareness, right? So we don't have to start cutting them up and rejecting them, because they're all part of They're just waves in the ocean, if you like, or clouds in the sky. They're not separate from the empty mind itself. But the problem is we cling to them and get fooled by them. So when you see it, they just dissolve as clouds do, naturally, just on seeing. Or they, what do waves do? Well, they crash, but then they just dissolve back into the ocean itself. So it's the same process when you're thinking about moods and emotions, mind states, unpleasant feelings. It's a much friendlier way to embrace them rather than rejecting them, isn't it? They're just arising and ceasing, and we rest back into the vastness of the empty sky. Okay. Gigi says, what is in one is in the whole. Yeah, exactly. That's what I was kind of trying to point to there. Someone said, Eve's saying, can you tell me what happened to the body that I occupied in my dream state last night? I was certain that it was real and solid. I awoke and it was gone. Will this be the experience at death? Oh, it's the same, often talked about, the dream state. We wake up from each morning and we realize it was just a dream. But when we're dreaming, as you're saying, Eve, it seems so real. It's the same with the waking state. We feel this is even more real, at the time anyway. And then you can say that when we wake up from this dream of being a separate self, having these experiences, we're waking up from a dream. In terms of the experience of death, we wake up that there's no such thing as death. Death is just another concept. Certainly we perceive the appearance, disappearance, dissolution of forms, separate forms or bodies, whether it be a human body or a tree or a bird or an animal. But if we come back to what I was just talking about, we call it death, and we perceive, then we start to think that somebody or something has died and gone. But if you come back to that analogy of the ocean, these bodies go back to the elements from which they came, so that nothing really dies. It transforms at the material level, the physical level. It transforms, it doesn't die. We say we've created this notion of death. And in terms of the consciousness was ultimately never born, or awareness, so it can never die. Consciousness transforms itself depending on the karmic stream of consciousness. But if you go back to the notion of the original mind, and even having that glimpse of a moment of knowingness, beingness, you see clearly, don't you? Hopefully. It's not something that's actually born or exists as a thing. So how can what isn't born die? So it's something to contemplate. When we wake up from this stream of the waking state, then we realize it's just a dream. Things keep appearing and disappearing in the phenomenal world. but the knowingness that is really the unborn, if you like. Okay. Lee is asking below, when you find or recognize this knowingness or awareness, haven't you found that which was doing the search? Yeah, totally. Well, and that which was doing the search was just kind of the movement, the confusion. And when you rest in it, when you recognize it, the search stops, because this notion of a searcher is seen through. And, you know, don't always expect it's going to just be really stable at the beginning. This is why we practice, to stabilize it, to so that it becomes, I mean, it is immovable, but we go out and start moving again from different triggers, right? So we've got to also, I guess this is important too, not to be complacent. You know, a lot of people can have a moment of quite powerful awakening, and then they just think their work's done. And it's clearly not. You know, at one level it is, because there was never any work to do. But we've always got to straddle what's called the two truths. Okay, and if there's still delusion and negativity and reactivity happening, we've still got work to do. And so we have to always keep looking honestly, and not just think, oh, it's all over for me, I'm enlightened and there's nothing to do, and I rest on my laurels and I'll start a cult, become a spiritual teacher or something like that. You know, anyone who starts thinking like that is just deluded. We just is what it is. And every moment is new and changing, and also unchanging. Anyway. Yes, so you are what you're looking for, says yes, awareness does the transformation. Yes, isn't that amazing? Takes also, you know, it's not some wonderful awake person who does the transformation. It's the impersonal awareness within us all. So that takes the pride out of it too, takes the deluded ego out of it, because it's just like I said at the beginning with this channel, I'm not doing it. Not me doing it. It's just happening. Just go for the ride, you know, enjoy the ride, but don't start thinking that it's you who's special or doing it or even enlightened. It's just enlightenment's enlightenment. So Shane's saying, I struggle with becoming nobody. The empty state of mind is the ultimate reality. But does this deny my real human experience and story, my pain and trauma, my love for my child, etc.? No, Shane. I mean, hopefully what I've said since you typed this question might have answered some of those concerns, but it's not about becoming nobody, because you already are nobody. It's about freeing yourself from the delusion that you are somebody. And when you say the empty state of mind is the ultimate reality, it's not just an empty blank state of void of nothingness. What I was trying to encourage you to feel into in that meditation was that the qualities, they're very subtle qualities, but they're not indifferent, callous coldness. All right. So this emptiness is actually fullness, as they say. It's full of compassion. It's full of wisdom. It's full of love. It's full of all the divine qualities and emotions, you could say, but they're not emotions that are attached. All right. Because when we're attached to this body, this pain, my trauma, my child, then we're deluded because we're setting up these beliefs in duality, in separateness. But there is a way to, wake up, realize emptiness in a way that doesn't deny the appearances. But the love that you might have for a child or a partner or a friend transforms from attachment, because of wisdom, into pure love. Okay, so if my child tells me they hate me and I'm a terrible person, that love doesn't move. It's unconditional, right? So it's not the love that's dependent on someone being something that we want them to be, and neither is it dependent on them being around, right? So that if a child did die, if a parent dies, the love doesn't die. The form transforms, but if we really are in touch with the quality, our own inherent quality, that itself is undying, unchanging. And there is a way to integrate, if you like, but it takes practice, time, and it takes coming up against these things too, So sometimes we've got to just go to the edge, be pushed to the edge to learn these things, right? And that's the only way, I guess, that we can integrate. Integration is a slow process. It doesn't happen overnight. So another quality that's needed in all of this is patience. All right. So Jenny says, the meditation was very appropriate, as I'm finding that I'm getting more rattled more often these days. I feel the need to understand these moods, but it's hard to accept them. Yeah, and I just encourage you not to try and analyze them till the cows come home, or understand them necessarily in an intellectual, conceptual way. Sometimes that happens, and it can be quite helpful. You understand that, this mood is triggered because of my early relationship or my early trauma. And so when that kind of replicates itself in some ways, you can see that connection, that interconnection. But sometimes we don't understand the moods, and that can be frustrating too. It's like, why am I always in this shitty mood? I don't get it. And we rack our brains. And maybe no answer, clear answer can come. So we can't force that. And if we can just be with it, even with not understanding it, not really knowing why I'm triggered like that, but just have compassion and patience and just see it as a mood. It doesn't matter what sort of mood it is. It's just knowing that they're all of the same nature. They're changeable, impermanent. They're empty, and they're certainly not who and what we are. And that's what's going to transform them. And the more we can do that, the more they'll just lessen. Okay, they won't have the same sting. They won't stick around for as long, and then eventually, they don't even have an impact on us. A bit like Velcro, it doesn't stick. So Shuna has asked, I find the emotion of anger at times very difficult to overcome. I'm aware that it is deep-seated, and I can't seem to find its root. Yeah. While trying to sit still, how does one deal with it? It's there. Well, I think pretty much what I just said, Shunya, in response to Jani. It is a difficult emotion, anger. Because it's probably one of the most unpleasant, and it's, I guess, one of the most powerful, can just kind of take over We feel really tense. And not only do we feel tense, we often feel a lot of guilt with being angry, particularly women. It's not, women shouldn't be angry. We should be nice and loving all the time and soft and gentle. And so anger for women is a big challenge because of that conditioning. And it's difficult for us to express anger, and that's not a bad thing, But suppression isn't great either, because often suppressed anger just turns into depression, and we implode, turn it on ourselves. But the other kind of expression, you see what happens with, and it's mainly, men who express that anger through wars, killing, rape, mass murders. I mean, 99.9% of those, it's men expressing anger. So it's not a good option either. It might be more free to express it and less kind of neurotic about it than women, but when it explodes, it hurts so many people. But when we implode, we can hurt ourselves a lot, and then we can unconsciously take that anger out on people too. That's the other thing. There can be a lot of passive aggressiveness. So, because anger's, I don't know, it's just a very destructive emotion. But at the same time, when we get to know it, make friends with it, not be afraid of it, not justify it, then we can, it's an energy, right? And then when we see that this energy that's then contorted with all our conditioning and our stories and our life's experience, it's so strong that it sends us a bit crazy, right? And there's a lot of practices, particularly in Vajrayana Buddhism, that transform anger, because it's said to have at its root a lot of clarity. Pure anger can just be this energy that cuts through. It's very clear, but if you don't, most of us don't have that capacity to transform it in a healthy way through those sort of practices. But the simplest way to do it is just to try to feel it in your body, to breathe with it, to let go of the storyline, and to get that balance between acting out of anger and then repressing it, becoming unconscious, and then getting depressed or taking it out unconsciously on other people. So, you say you can't find its root. At one level, it doesn't have a root. It's rootless. And all these emotions are rootless. They may seem to be kind of have substance, but they don't. So, yeah, just keep practicing, and these insights investigate with a mind that's interested to understand, but not necessarily figure it out, if that makes sense. Because you can think you can figure it out intellectually, and then it's going to change, and you're going to get a different storyline. But the physical, felt sense of it is where it's most helpful to be, and to allow just the clear seeing to transform it in and of itself. And eventually you will see that this anger actually is just substanceless. It's just energy. Let go of the story that I'm angry, I'm an angry person, or this person caused me to be angry. And you feel into this kind of energy arising, dissolving, and be with it. Okay. Where do we go here? I'm a bit lost. I'm lost. Just bear with me, folks, if you wouldn't mind, because this thing scrolls. Oh, yeah, I found Lee. So Leo, here's a question. I'd like to know more about the house builder. So he's referring to the Buddha's reference to the builder of the house you have been seeing. Would you recommend any particular reading? Oh, there's many readings that the Buddha spoke about how this house builder comes to be. I guess in the Theravadan tradition, the most complex is to read about dependent origination. The house builder was referred to in his his final teaching, where he said, I've seen the house builder, meaning that which creates this sense of becoming, of this separate being, and there's no more houses, there's no more builder, there's no more houses to be built. So that was the final sutta. You could read the Satipatthana. So I'm assuming, because you're referring to that you're interested in how the Buddha spoke about it and how he taught around it. So the Four Noble Truths, the first sutta that he gave, would also be one to read, because all those teachings, the fundamentals are there about how suffering comes to be, how suffering ceases. And essentially, they are the building blocks for the house, this construct of a self. Okay, so some nice little reflections under that. Some funny conversations happening. Here's a question. While practicing meditation, how will be the lazy mind, and what? Okay, so the lazy mind, and what do I do with it when I see the mind's lazy or perhaps drowsy? Yeah, common thing. Again, it's just trying to see the nature of the drowsy mind, the lazy mind. What does it feel like? It's quite interesting to do that sometimes, because I'm not sure if you're saying lazy or sleepy, but I'm going to go with dull and sleepy. Because when you're meditating and you're not doing anything, and you might just be sitting in silence, right? The mind says, well, nothing's going on here. Feels like maybe it's time for sleep. But along with that, the mind gets quite peaceful, right? Because there's not a lot of thinking. You're not feeding the thought stream. The body probably feels relaxed enough. And it's at that moment, it actually can be really, really powerful for wakefulness, believe it or not. So because you have a fairly relaxed, quiet mind, if you are able to bring that light of awareness to it at that moment, it can really brighten up the whole thing, and many insights can arise because there's not a lot of discursive thinking. So look into the lazy mind. Look at the one who feels lazy, the assumptions there, the one that has a sense of itself sitting there, and see what happens. Practically, you can do other things, like you can splash some cold water on your face, get up and do some walking meditation. Buddha recommended pulling the earlobes, because that has certain meridians in it that create wakefulness. But and they work, but I always found that when I could remember to do it, to just utilize that so-called lazy state, because it's very restful, very empty, and to sharpen the samadhi. so you can turn this laziness into great wakefulness. Play around and see Bhavani, experiment. Because I'm gathering by your name, Chandrasekhar, that you're Sri Lankan. And the thing about people from those cultures, Sri Lanka, India, Asia, not as conceptual, much easier for them to go into very peaceful states of mind, states of bliss. A lot of faith from people, especially Sri Lankan people. So the faith and the lack of overthinking can create a very peaceful mind space. But for some, obviously, when it's that peaceful, you just want to fall asleep. So these are just some suggestions, and it's a bonus really to have a mind that can just rest. But we don't want to rest so much that we just feel slothful and lazy. So bring that energy up, bring that faith element up in the Buddha, and investigate, and then see what happens. Okay, so maybe one more question, because then I need to finish and also let you know what the changes are that I mentioned at the beginning. So I have ringing in the ears, I guess. I have ringing in the ears, and it gets louder by the time, and recently a tremor and burning sensation in parts of the body, which also get worse by the time. It amplifies agitation and frustration in the mind. The mind seems to not accept it and can't stop resisting those conditions. I need advice. Thank you. It sounds like a tinnitus, doesn't it? Some people have that. And similarly with, when I first started meditating, remember in my 20s, I would get these burning sensations in my body too. Quite unpleasant. But, the encouragement was just to sit with them. And I know you're saying that it's difficult to resist them. We're not trying to resist them. And even when you say can't accept them, just notice the resistance more. Notice that which doesn't want to accept them. Now, if it gets really intense, you can't force yourself to be with these unpleasant sensations and feelings. When they're that intense, if you don't have that capacity just to burn them up, to sit through them, then you do skillful things. Like I would encourage you perhaps to do walking meditation, to learn how to do walking meditation. In terms of the ringing in the ear, the tinnitus, I'm not sure. I'm not an expert on what to do with that. Whether it helps to listen to some teachings. Obviously, there's a lot of resources on my channel to listen to a spoken teaching or a guided meditation, whatever, if that helps. And then you have to trust your own judgment with this. No one can really tell you how to deal with it per se. You have to experiment. Can you sit through some of this a bit and then a bit more each time and then a bit more? Or are you seeing that you're just forcing yourself and trying to suppress these feelings? You need to see that and then trust your own judgment about what do I need now? This isn't working. Get up, stop meditating for a while, read some Dharma, go for a walk, do something that's still keeping the mind focused on peace and truth. But if it sounds like at times it's very intense, so you need to break that pattern. When you've broken it for a bit and you've tried other things, go back and see what happens. All right, okay, I can sit with this now. It's not as intense. These things burn themselves out eventually, but again, Patience is really what's required. Sometimes these strange sensations are just old sankharas, old karmic things coming to the surface because we're practicing, right? People think when they start meditating, oh, I'm going to get bliss and it's all going to be like, it's not what happens. Okay, it's a purification process at one level, even though the mind is already pure, but the other stuff has to kind of, we have to clear out the garbage, right? And allow it to clear out. So knowing this, then we don't have to worry too much. We can actually feel like, oh, this is good. I'm clearing out some stuff. And you'll know you are, because you'll start feeling lighter as the days and months pass by. Old scabs just drop off, yeah? When you clear out the garbage in your house, it feels lighter. And that's what's happening in the body-mind. But don't try and figure it out, because when we figure it out, we're just adding more garbage. Just an element of trust is required, okay? So, folks, I'm going to have to leave it there and apologize in advance if I didn't get to answer your question. But often I find that I answer a question and then the next question is probably already been answered from the prior questions. Okie dokie. So what I said at the beginning was that from today there's going to be a few small changes ahead in relation to this live stream setup. Not in relation to the uploads and stuff like that. They'll just be what they are. But in terms of the live stream, I've asked Ayya Jatindra to run a series of teachings on Buddha Dharma, mainly focusing on the key elements of practice from early Buddhism, because she has an incredible wealth of experience and knowledge, having been a nun since she was 23 in different formations with a break in between. But anyway, she turns 60 this week. So she's had a wealth of experience, a wealth of knowledge. And I've asked her to run a series to share her wisdom knowledge with you. So that is going to start in a month's time. And we'll put all these details up on our website as well as here. So don't worry too much if you don't remember. But after this session, we're going to take a month's break. And then coming back on the 14th of May will be the first session of her Buddha Dharma series, session 1. Now, the slight change I mentioned was that we're going to change the day. So it's going to be on a Sunday now. And the slight change of time will be at 7 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time instead of 8 a.m. And that makes it a little bit more user-friendly for people in Europe. It's the best we could do. Doesn't help out our friends in India. They're always in the middle of the night. And some parts of Southeast Asia and Africa it works. But anyway, it's recorded. So if you can't make the live sessions or this new series, it's going to be in a new playlist, so you can watch it later. So anyway, that's what's going to happen. We're going to start with the Buddha Dharma series in a month's time with Ayya Jatindra, and she'll be imparting her wisdom, and there'll be opportunities for questions and also some short meditation too, focusing on the early Buddhism. So come along if you're interested in understanding early Buddhism as taught by the Buddha in the suttas. And it's not exclusively going, I mean, she'll draw on other stuff as well, particularly that she knows from the Dzogchen tradition. But it is going to be more focused on those key teachings. Whereas these live stream sessions, they're kind of open. We can talk about anything. It's not focused exclusively on Buddha Dharma. and most people who come probably aren't even Buddhists or interested in Buddhism. So anyway, that's why we just wanted to offer that as well. What else to say? So the standard YouTube group meditations like this will continue, but every third session until December will be Ayya Jatindriya's series. Okay, so I hope I haven't confused you with that, but I would just say look out. There'll be she's going to do a post about it on the Viveka Hermitage website, probably in a week or so. So you can look out for that new post, and we'll also post the dates for the Buddha Dharma series. But in terms of consistency, it'll be Sunday, 7 a.m. Okay. Any questions about that? Have to be quick questions. Yeah, so someone said I can get up and do it early at 7 a.m. And yeah, for Australians, 7 a.m. on a Sunday is probably a bit better because a lot of people have to go to work at 8 a.m. on a Monday. And in Europe, it'll be a little bit more user-friendly. In the States, I think it's fine. It's Saturday afternoon. Southeast Asia, all different. I'm not sure about Africa, actually, what time it is in South Africa. It's probably closer to us because of, parts of Africa. All right, and someone's sending best wishes for Ayya Jatindriya's 60th birthday. Yay, happy birthday. All right, Keith from Batemans Bay. Hi, Keith, down in Batemans Bay. It's a lovely day today in the Eurobodalla Shire. Okay, so no questions. I hope today's session was helpful, and I'll see you in about 6 weeks' time on this thing anyway. And as I said, keep the Sunday the 14th of May free if you want to come for the first series of Buddha Dharma. All right, everybody. My battery's about to expire, I think, on this laptop. So I will leave it there. Sending you all good wishes and happy birthday. Ciao.